Hello, everyone. My name is Roland Ottley. I am a physician assistant. I'm also an attorney at the Ottley Law Firm. I am doing this presentation to inform my community members about coronavirus. I want my community members to know that this virus is very dangerous. As you all know, I'm sure many of you have know someone who has suffered a loss as a result of this pandemic. I am reaching out to my community members to further inform you. I know that you're already being bombarded by the news, but this virus, coronavirus, is very contagious, very contagious. It's airborne, and we need to social distance ourselves so that we could prevent the spread of this virus. The end of March, going into April, we noted that there was a rush of people coming to the hospitals seeking care. Some of those people had to be turned away because the hospital was beyond its capacity. And as a result, some of them left the hospital and went home and passed away. A few of my clients have called me and informed me of this unfortunate event for some of the people that they know. And at this point, I want to try to reach out to as many of my community members to make sure that they understand the seriousness of this matter. Because when you look from outside, it appears as though everything could be normal, but in reality, it's just not. We're all self-isolating, and we're all keeping social distance so that we could prevent getting infected with this virus. Now, I want you to know that this virus can be contracted by airborne routes, as well as from touching a surface that the virus is living on, and then touching your eyes, nose, or mouth. Okay, so you really have to make a conscious effort on a minute-by-minute basis to avoid getting infected with this virus. One of the very dangerous things about this particular virus is that some people are completely free of any symptoms. So that person would not even realize that they have this virus. Those people could easily spread the virus. Now, when those people are out in the community and they're talking, because they may not even be coughing, but they may be talking, the virus could go into the air, and if you're in close contact with them, you can breathe it in. They can touch surfaces, then you could touch it after, and as a result, you're now having the virus on you somewhere, and if you were to touch your eyes, nose, or mouth, you could then get infected with the virus. So even if you don't like to wear the mask, I wear the mask myself. I know that they're not comfortable. I know that it's hard to breathe through the mask, but it's a necessary discomfort for a very necessary preventive measure. And I can't overemphasize that to you. I want everyone to understand this so that you know that this is a very important thing. Now, a few weeks ago, we had a bombardment, a rush of people coming to the emergency room. It was very traumatic for the patients, because some of them actually died, and for the nurses and doctors and all the frontline people that were involved in taking care of those people. At this point now, that wave, at least in New York City, in Brooklyn, New York, in Brownsville area, East Flatbush area where I reside, it's not the same as it was a few weeks ago. But these patients are still coming to the emergency room. They're still being admitted to the hospital, and a lot of people who do not have COVID are coming to the hospital because they have serious conditions. Some of them are not coming to the hospital, even though they may have a serious condition, because they are just afraid to do so because they're afraid of contracting COVID-19. Now, let me just say a few things about this. It appears as though now that the doctors are realizing that some of the patients that were turned away from the hospital because their breathing complaints did not appear to be so bad. The doctors and nurses are very familiar with patients with this infection that are coming in with a very bad pneumonia. So even though you may be feeling like you're having symptoms and you need to get some care, you may not need to be admitted, and they will tell you to go home and monitor yourself. What I've noticed from hearing reports from people around in the community, some people have gone home and within 2 hours they've passed away. And some of them that they've described to me are people who were going to the bathroom. They were naked when they were found. So I said to myself, well, these people probably weren't having some breathing problems before they passed away. Otherwise, they would have probably been preparing themselves to go to the bathroom, to call a friend and get dressed so that they could leave and go to the hospital. You know, what kind of symptoms could they have possibly had? And then I said, well, the only thing that I know that would cause someone to pass away like that is if they had a stroke. And just today I was speaking to someone and I said, the person could have had a stroke. And this morning, I think over the weekend, I found a few articles that were describing patients with few symptoms of the disease having strokes, young patients in their 30s and 40s. And that was quite scary to me. And I thought, well, even before that report came out, I was thinking maybe someone had what we call a pulmonary embolism, where they develop a blood clot in their leg, and that blood clot moves from their leg and travels up to their lungs, and that could kill you if it's big enough. And I think this is what some of these people that passed away may have had. Now, the city coroner's office was so inundated that they were not able to perform autopsies on these people. There's so many people passing away that even a private pathologist probably wasn't able to do autopsies to figure out the cause of death. So some of these people that passed away just didn't get the examination that they would need to find out exactly why they passed away. But in any event, I have heard that the hospitals now, when they're sending people home, they are giving them medications to help them to not form blood clots. And hopefully that would prevent them from developing the pulmonary embolism that I just described, where the blood clot forms in their legs and moves to their lungs to cause them death, or to cause them some other kind of cardiac problem where their heart's now not beating properly, and then they could have even a heart attack as a result of a blood clot. They can also have a stroke. And a person described a young family member who was at home and was weak on one side of the body, and they just couldn't explain that. And that person likely suffered a stroke. So I say these things to all of you to let you know from someone who's on the front line what we're seeing in treating these patients. It's very difficult. Yes, we are afraid. Of course, we're using personal protective equipment, and we're getting more of those equipments in now. And we're trying to treat all of these patients as best we can, give them as much reassurance. Now, I say this to you because I want all of you to respect the social distancing. It's really a problem if you're going to be hanging out on the corner with your friends and you may not realize, because there's not that many testing, and if you don't feel sick, you're not going to go for testing just to see if you are or not. So, you want to keep the social distancing. Wear a mask. Please wear a mask, because the studies have shown if you have it and you wear a mask, you're not emitting that viral load around the people around you so that they may get it. And if the person who has it is wearing a mask and the person who doesn't have it is also wearing a mask, that just tremendously lowers down the transmission rate of this virus. So I want for all of you to please do this, because if a person comes into the hospital with this condition, we don't have a good treatment. A vaccine is probably not going to be available until sometime next year if it's shown to be safe and effective. Now, I just want to mention this other particular part, and I don't know if you all have been hearing about this, but the World Health Organization has said that countries who are thinking about issuing an immune certificate should not do so, because people may not be immune even though they have already been infected with this virus. Now, that's also very concerning. Okay? Now, usually if you've had the virus, you've had the chicken pox, we've all had that. You've had the chicken pox. After you've had it, you've developed the immunity, you're good. People who have had this coronavirus, when they check their immunity, they would call it a serology test, they would realize that they're not producing the adequate number or the adequate level of antibodies to be able to remove the virus and fight the virus and eradicate it from their bodies. So now it's scary that someone has been infected with this virus and yet still they don't develop the necessary immunity such that they can get this infection again. Now, that's another reason why you need to wear the mask, because if you can't develop immunity to it and you can get reinfected by it, you just don't want to even get the first infection. And so it tells me that I'm not sure now, I'm not confident myself personally whether a vaccine will be effective. And the other thing that I have been looking into myself is they're now reporting that there are about 30 different strains of this virus. And they're saying that there are 19 of them that are new. Now, the virus, some would say, does not mutate. It doesn't, the DNA of the virus, the RNA of the virus, because this is an RNA virus, the RNA of the virus usually doesn't change much. It's pretty stable. But the studies are showing that that may not actually be the case. There is some change, and more work needs to be done to find out how stable or how unstable this virus is, and whether people that have been infected by a different strain of it may present with slightly different symptoms than others. Now, the symptoms of the virus that has been reported, and more symptoms are coming out as they're being discovered, is the usual fever, cough, and shortness of breath. That was the very first set of symptoms that came out. And now they've also added to this loss of taste and smell. Now there's also this kind of rash on people's feet. There's aches, there are muscle cramps, and things like that. So the symptoms we're now learning about the symptoms as we're taking time to, and the articles, the research are coming out. Now, in terms of the research related to COVID-19, I want to say to you that the research that's coming out are peer-reviewed research. Okay, now what does that mean? That means that ordinarily, before there's a publication in a very prestigious journal like the New England Journal of Medicine, a panel of experts would review that research and criticize it and ask for revisions of it and modifications or what have you, and raise questions and comment if it's really good or comment about its weaknesses and so forth. This is not happening right now. These articles are being done by credible researchers, and we're taking them at face value. Okay, so when maybe at this point when coronavirus is under more control, less prevalent in our communities, someone will go back and review these articles and say, well, this one was weak for this reason, or this one was really strong for that reason, and so forth and so on. And then, we could start to really put things together as more research has been done. So everything that you hear now is, you have to take with a grain of salt, even with the research. But the research is there. This is the research that we have, and this is the research that we have to work with. It's not perfect, but it is helpful, and it helps, and it is helping to save some of these patients. Now, in terms of treatment of the patients, and the use of ventilators, you may have heard that the ventilators for some patients are not helping, and if you put someone on the ventilator, they're going to die. You have to also understand that we're treating these patients for a condition called acute respiratory distress syndrome, where the lungs fail because of infection or trauma or some other mechanism that's causing the lungs to fail. And ordinarily, when a patient would have acute respiratory distress syndrome, we would put a patient on a ventilator for how many days or weeks until their lungs are able to recover. However, with COVID-19, putting these patients on a respirator is sometimes not helpful for the patients. Most of the time, it's not helpful to the patients, because this type of acute respiratory distress syndrome caused by this virus is different from what we were seeing before, what we know before. So as a result, the ventilator may not be effective. There is another treatment called ECMO, ECMO, stands for extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, and fancy term for being able to bypass the lung completely and have the blood removed from the person's body and put oxygen into the blood, and then send the blood back into the person's body, sort of like a dialysis. Okay, those machines are not readily available, and they're more expensive than a ventilator, and they're limited amounts in the hospitals. So that was not going to be a treatment that was going to be available for all of these people with COVID disease. So the doctors who are treating patients with COVID now are trying their best not to put people on the ventilator, and to treat them as with all other sorts of oxygen supplementation, and try to prevent from them having to be placed on the ventilator. And some of them that can be transferred to a facility that does have ECMO, these people are being transferred to those facilities. Personally, I think every hospital in Brooklyn should have a few of these machines for this particular purpose. And I don't know if that's going to actually happen. But, we as a community would have to demand that the hospitals be equipped with this if we're going to save members of our community. Now, the other thing is, some of these patients are also presenting with renal failure as well when they're quite sick. Again, we think this is because the COVID, the virus causes an inflammatory response in the body that causes the body to be more prone to developing blood clots. And that's why, as I said before, people could develop this pulmonary embolism, a heart attack, a stroke, and so forth and so forth. So, this is a very serious problem, and it's confounding physicians all over the world. And we're trying our best to see how well we could combat this virus. You, the community out there, we want you to do what you could do. We need for you to do what you do. There are plenty of pictures on the internet, social media, where the nurses and docs are taking pictures and say, you stay inside so that, you could help us and while we're helping others. Okay, so that's why it's so important for us to continue this social distancing, staying inside, quarantining and wearing a mask when you do have to go outside, and just staying vigilant as to what you're touching, and making sure that if you touch the surface that you wash your hands. You have to practice washing your hands, washing your hands, washing your hands. It has to become, such an ingrained part of you now. We have to start doing this. And this is like crucially important, especially in our community. Now, the Black and Hispanic community have been really hard hit by this virus. Downstate Hospital in the East Flatbush area, the Brownsville, East New York area, very hard hit. The minority community. Why? I would say part of the reason why is there is this discrepancy, this disparity in the availability of health care, okay? And also our community has a large number of the population have hypertension, which is a predisposing condition to having a more serious clinical condition when you get infected with the coronavirus. We also have diabetes that's high in the population, and also a high incidence of obesity in the population. Yes, we have a lot of fast food restaurants and everything in our community, and so forth and so on. And maybe, some age groups in our community are not involved in healthy living and healthy eating and exercise and so forth and so on. So as a result, if they get infected with this virus, they are going to face the more critical end of the spectrum of this disease. And so we have our elected officials. I've seen Eric Adams out there, speaking on this topic and trying to get the elected officials to bring more resources into the Black communities to help them to be able to weather this situation, to provide the care that they desperately need. I mean, some of the other hospitals that are richer, they have rich board of directors that could fly to China and pick up protective equipment and bring it back so that they can use that to take care of the patients that they have in the hospitals. And some of the other hospitals are using garbage bags as personal protective equipment. That situation is getting better, but we did experience that, and it's unfortunate. So again, I want to make sure that everyone knows, wash your hands, clean the things that you bring into your household before you open it. Wash your hands, don't touch your mouth, don't touch your nose, don't touch your eyes, and try to exercise these kinds of preventive measures on a day-by-day basis. Please tolerate being inside. It's for a good purpose. Okay, because we really don't know. This is like playing Russian roulette. You just cannot tell who's gonna have no symptoms, who's gonna have mild symptoms, who's gonna have severe symptoms, and who's gonna have such critical symptoms that no kind of amount of healthcare is going to be able to save them. We just can't tell. So the best thing to do is to try to prevent the infection with this virus, and to take all of the precautions that you can. Wear a mask. If you can't afford a mask, you don't have a mask, put something over, some kind of barrier, so that at least you have something that's limiting to some degree the amount of this virus that you may be exposed to. At this point now, I want to thank all of the people that listen to this short presentation. I hope it was informative. I hope that you were informed enough to do your own research, to look into certain things. And I hope that you remember me saying to you, please wash your hands, Don't touch your mouth, nose, or eyes without first washing your hands. And please wear your mask. Thank you, everyone. Please be safe. And I hope to come back and give you more updated presentations at a later date. God bless you all.